to the Creative Constitution podcast. Today I've got a very special guest, Adrian Carr, who's decided to come on. Hello, Adrian. How
Hi
are
there.
we?
I'm good, Dad. How are you?
I'm very good. Today's episode is all about bringing scripts to life, and Adrian is one of the best people to talk to about that. So, Adrian, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
In a nutshell,
In a nutshell.
my professional career, people would know me for as a film editor in the early 70s, cutting a television series, then commercials, and then editing my first feature, which was a film called Harlequin, followed by The Man from Snowy River, which is what most people know me for. And then that progressed to other movies, including my first American movie called Daryl. It was a science fiction family adventure film. And that got me to America. It got me to England, where I blossomed in learning more of the craft and meeting people in the industry. And that's when I really discovered it's a business, not so much in cottage industry, which we had in Australia at the time.
Yeah.
But it's now more of a business. So there's a lot more at stake. So then I worked on a movie called The Light Horseman, which was a World War I epic. And there, again, it's that integration of learning about script, about developing characters, etc., and on a big scale. And I soaked up so much knowledge from working with the writers and producers of that. And but in 1982, after The Man from Snowy River, I was asked to edit a movie called Now and Forever, and starring Cheryl Ladd and Robert Colby.
Mm-hmm.
And about 3 weeks into the film shooting, the director was replaced by myself.
Wow.
I was asked to take over the film. I can't go into the details about how it all came about, but let's just say it's not how I wanted to become a director.
You're forced into it almost.
Pretty much. I had to be approved by Cheryl and the financiers, the guarantors. But because Snowy River had just come out and was getting high praise, it put me in a good position to be able to take over the movie. And with all my editing experience, I was primed to do that. And the only problem was everything was already set in stone. The script was locked, which I didn't really like that much. So we kept rewriting it every day. And in that process, I really used everything I knew about editing, and in the little films that I directed, exercise things to come to bear on the project. And we came in, I think, 4 hours over budget, over schedule, and under budget. So with that following through to around the late 80s, I directed a movie for John Lamont, starring Richard Norton, a martial arts action flick in Thailand.
So cool.
And that, again, that was more in my wheelhouse, directing action and shooting on locations. So when we finished that, I was then asked to edit a movie called Quigley Down Under. And I held out. I didn't really just want to edit anymore. So after 3 separate phone calls, I said, if I can direct second unit, then you can have me. Which
Wow.
I then got to direct second unit. So again, that gave me more credentials internationally. And then a year later, my wife and I left Australia to come to the States.
Was directing something that was always long-term goal for you?
Nope. When I studied photography, or my father taught me photography when I was 12, processing in the dark in the kitchen, using the developer, the wash, the fixer. And then I became the school photographer. and then I studied at RMIT, the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology. I studied photography part-time while I was working at the ABC in the mailroom, delivering mail around the building. And they had an internal magazine which advertised assistant cine cameraman positions. So with photography, cinematography, that's where I thought I was going to head. And I could never get an interview in the 4 months of applying for these fortnightly jobs. Then there was one for an assistant editor, and I thought, oh, what the heck? I'll apply for that. And I got it. And that started the editing process. And that's when I realized the storytelling part of news or current affairs and then drama with Crawford Productions. You realize that's where the power is in productions. So
Yeah, it's like directing from within, pretty much.
Yeah. But the only drawback with being the editor is you don't have any influence really over what's being shot daily. You get everything in arrears. You can suggest, oh, it'd be great to have a close-up of this or an insert shot of that. And that's what I did on Quickly Down Under, a lot of insert shots, Alan Rickman's hand doing the quick draw, insert shots of bullets, horses falling off cliffs. You knew what you needed to tell the story, but you had control over the elements. And that is what led me to coming to the States to work on films out here, is to direct, because the editing I can do anyway.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I have that skill already. So I could shoot my own stuff and then fix up any screw-ups because I'd know how to fix it because I've been doing that for 30 years.
I know, what an amazing career. And then once you sort of got to the US and you started directing, did those scripts come from you? Did you write them? Did you get them? How was the process there?
With all the awards and the acknowledgements and the experience and the films that I've worked on in Australia, I thought naively that that would help me. But when you come to the States, they're very skeptical of you because are you here just to make a quick buck and then leave? Or are you here for the long haul? So, you know, I could have come into a ladder here.
Right.
But I start right down here. Awards don't mean anything. You just have to pay your dues again. So I was very fortunate that my agent knew Chaim Saban, and they were doing a TV series called The Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And he arranged for me to have an interview and with Chaim and his business partner, Shuki. And they asked me to direct the pilot and the first 4 episodes. So therein began the American journey. Yeah. But
I saw that on your IMDb and I was like, oh my gosh, I was sort of fangirling a little bit there. I grew up on those things, so it's pretty damn amazing.
Okay, a little trivia.
All right. Oh gosh. It's
When we
been a
did-
while. Hey, I may
Oh,
not.
you'll remember this. You'll
Okay.
remember this. You know when they do the the morphine transformation?
Yeah.
Well, we didn't have the prop belt built when we started shooting.
Yeah.
So when the kids are all tossed to the ground by the putty men, it's like, okay, they're going to bring out their morphers and do morphin time. But where are the morphers?
Yeah.
So if you ever watch the pilot episode, you'll see them reach behind their back
Oh, and they bring it out.
and they bring it out.
Wow.
And that move we made up on the spot.
That's amazing.
And that move itself, Richard Norton, a martial arts actor, martial artist in Australia, very, very close friend. back in the early 70s, he showed me these katas where they would do all these movements. And I remember that one, the twist and the push. I went,
It's sort of
that'll
like
work.
Dragon Ball Z as well, like when they do the Kamehameha, like it's sort of a bit similar.
Uh-huh.
That was that before your project? Was there any inspiration from those when you were sort of putting the pilot together, like animations or Dragon Ball Z or like things like
No,
that?
nothing at all. The only
Mm,
thing that they had was it was a Japanese show that they bought the rights to.
mm,
And when the Power Rangers were in costume, it was the Japanese footage.
yeah,
But because I was doing the introduction to the US kids and the neighborhood and the attitude around uh, the characters and the situations in the school, etc.,
yeah.
it was, instead of being 50-50, it was more like 75-25, 75 US, 25 Japanese footage. And then
That's
gradually,
interesting.
once the characters were introduced, then it became more 50-50. And that way they could keep on a
Yeah.
schedule and a budget.
So what happened after those 4 episodes? So did you just end up getting scooped up for another bigger project, or you didn't like it enough to keep going? What happened? Give me all the goss.
Okay.
Oh, lay it down.
All right. So, again, this was my first opportunity to direct in America.
Yeah.
But I had sort of integrity with regard to um, honesty and loyalty. And the assistant director I had enabled me to get 40 setups on the very first day of filming and 70 by the end of shoot. And you shot 4 episodes at once in 11 days. And he was fired at the end of the 4 episodes, and they wanted me to stay on, but they wanted to give me an AD who had shot another 4 episodes prior to the pilot, because you get the kids warmed up on 4 other episodes, then you shoot the pilot when they're a bit more together and working as a unit. And he was getting 20 setups a day. And I went, why would I work with someone who's only getting
Interesting.
20 and you fire the one person that's getting 40 to 70 setups a day?
Yeah.
It
Wow.
doesn't make sense. And it was because he wasn't brown nosing the production office. So,
Fair enough.
he would stand up to make sure I got what I needed.
Yeah.
So if he goes, I go.
That's interesting. I mean, that's great to hear, obviously, that especially early on in your career, you would think that you sort of be a little bit more of a pushover because you're probably scared that you won't get called back or whatever, but you stood your ground and you had an amazing career after that. So so it goes
Well,
to show integrity really matters.
well, I had a good conscience after it.
Yeah.
Admittedly, we were living hand to mouth,
Yeah.
so it wasn't necessarily a good financial move. But that, and this is part of the journey one goes on.
Yeah.
So, well, geez, you had a gig, your agent's pissed off. Your wife is not too happy, but she understood. But it's
Yeah.
like, what are we going to do? And shortly thereafter, I was asked to direct a adventure game, a
Oh,
computerized adventure
cool.
game. I had no idea what a CD-ROM was. This is like 93, 94, and I come from film.
Yeah.
I still cut on a moviola back then. So,
I read about those.
um, so it was a big change for me because I couldn't edit anything that came along, and then working in computers way over my head.
Yeah.
So, but to do a computer game on top of it was like insanity. So I had and the only reason I got to direct it was because they wanted someone to direct the 4 Hollywood actors they had coming in for the show.
Who were the voice actors?
No, it's all on camera. It's live action.
Right. Yeah.
It was called the Pandora Directive. And it won Game of the Year when it was Adventure Game of the Year when it was released.
Wow.
But you shot with some iconic actors.
Yeah.
And, but you would shoot the material on blue screen. Everything was blue screen for the computer game to put in the environments or interact with environment actions. And but I had to get acclimated to how we would shoot it. I went out there. We were shooting on Easter Monday morning, and I went out on Ascension Thursday. On Good Friday, I was shown the previous game and how it worked. And they had the actors, they would shoot them individually because on a black screen, then they could just edit them together and make them interact. I said, but what happens when you want to interact with the actor in emotional moments? Oh, no, we've never done that. Chris always comes in and does all his stuff at the end. And I said, well, that's going to change. So now he was going to have to interact with the likes of Kevin McCarthy, John Agar, and Barry Corbin and Tanya Roberts.
Yeah.
So on the Saturday, I was shown the VR world, which I'd never seen before. And I had done a little bit of computerized 3D work on a commercial back in the early 90s. So I understood the principle of it. And then it was working out how this 3D world could be photographed, even though it's a game, but how to put the actors within the game.
Yeah.
So then they call it full motion video, FMV.
It sounds like there were some similarities between sort of film and game and putting them together. So I'd love to dive into, well, all of them would have scripts. So let's talk about like what your process is when you actually look at those scripts and you're like, let's make this thing.
Okay. In the case of a computer game, it's not a traditional script because you've got all the pathing.
Yeah.
You make choices, and so you can have your character freeze, make a choice, they say something, the character responds, then you make another choice. So the script and the brilliance of Aaron Connors, the writer, co-creator of it, how he keeps conversations flowing, but in all different directions, so that you can, as a player, you can play it again, make different choices, have different outcomes within each scene, let alone the end of the game had 7 endings. So it was that at that time in 96, it won Game of the Year because of its interactivity. It was the most complex interactive game of its time. So again, my editing brain, you work out of sequence, so that was how I applied myself to the computer gaming side of it. And the script is just horrendous to look at. It's all these little blocks of dialogue.
Yeah.
Going on a traditional script, scripts come to me in various ways. And I'm not a writer. I don't sit down and go, okay, I'm going to write a script. That's not me.
You have to pick your strengths, I guess.
I'm an editor. I can script edit. I know enough about writing to be able to massage edits. When you cut something, we need this in here. I'll write something, and it may piss off the writer, or my wife is a good judge. She'll come in and go, "You can't say that. That doesn't work."
Yeah.
you would say something like this, or you work with the writer and say, this is not in your speak, but this is what we need to say. So over to you. If you can massage that in with your characterizations.
So when you get the script, do you tend to make a lot of changes to it? Like, do you work hand in hand with the writer, or like to transform it into something that you think will translate well to screen? Like, what sort of goes through your brain when you're looking at a script that's fallen on your lap, essentially, when you're thinking about directing something new?
Okay, I'll give you a sample script that we're in the process of developing. It's well developed now, called A Dolphin in Our Lake.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that came to us was through an attorney who said, do you guys have any faith-based scripts? Rosemary and I look at each other and go, faith-based scripts? Us? No. So there is a site over here called inktip.com. And Inktip is a site where writers put their projects up for people to look at and maybe purchase or option. But only people who can look at it are bona fide producers and directors. So we had belonged to that for 8 years at the time and had never really optioned anything because other projects came in all different directions. But this particular one, we didn't have any faith-based scripts. So we wanted to have a look at faith-based horror, faith-based action, faith-based romance, anything not just faith-based. So the owner of the company contacted Rosemary and said, we've just got this script that it's going back on the books. But before it does, I can give you a link to the log line, the brief synopsis, the two-liner. So we read that. The title already had us intrigued. And then he said, well, here's the synopsis, the one-page outline. And based on the one-page outline, we said, wow, this really could make a magnificent film. And we're big fans of Field of Dreams, and that's what this is. It's a field of dreams for the 21st century. So we then contacted the writer, Rosemary and Nick, the writer, got into a dialogue, and they could tell from their letter writing that they were really in sync. Then came the next step, was we read the script, and before we move any further on it, we need to take out an option. And this is where it all gets hard.
Yeah.
So we actually flew, and he lived in Ohio, where the story is set. So we flew from Los Angeles to Ohio and to meet him. And he was impressed with the fact that we actually made the effort to fly to him and not do it by emails, or him come out to LA. And we spent the weekend with him. Rosemary's a good negotiator and sat down and said, okay, before we talk creative stuff and fun stuff, let's get the business side out of the way. So we negotiated a figure that he was happy with, that we could afford. So it's us putting our dime in the pot.
Yeah.
But for that, we need some rewriting to be done. Because while we initially worked on the script, we love the script, and as soon as you go into the but and you start delving into it and breaking it down, it was complex in the sense that it involved period, 1940s, children, water, animals, and dolphins.
Yeah.
And each of them had their own no-nos. So, and then to put all of that into one package was very complex. And you're also growing corn, which you can only shoot one time a year. You only have a
Right.
limited period of time to film with the corn, and you have
Yeah.
to plant it in March, April to be able to harvest it in September, October. So you've got to have your production and cast and everything sorted in the early part of the year to be able to film at the end of the year and hope the weather's good and that the corn is grown.
Yeah, and you have a
So,
very specific window in order to do that in.
so the
Yeah.
principle, so what happened then is the writer then works with myself and Rosemary, and we look at the logistics. Is it? It was written as a theatre piece actually, because
Oh,
one
so
of
it
the
was
things we said.
adapted to film. Right.
Well, he was going to release it as a play, but he made a screenplay of the play. So one of our comments was that it's too insular. It needs to be expanded. We need to know the world these people live in. So let's see the town. Let's see this. Let's expand this. Let's expand that. And in doing that, changes the context of the dialogue and the relationship of the characters.
Yeah, you
And
have more world building and
yeah,
yeah.
so it starts to shift the dynamic of the story. Now, the writer is the one doing the work.
Yeah.
We're giving them notes. But there is a certain point where sometimes the notes are misconstrued. And because of Final Draft writing program, I'll go in and dabble, but I'll always use a color code.
Yeah, so that they
So he
know
can
where.
see where I've added something, taken something out, and you can do notes on the side to say why, and then they can go, I agree, or we need to talk about that. So,
Yeah.
and that's where Zoom really came into play, because we were in Los Angeles, he was in Ohio. So we started Zooming and had like 3 or 4 hour Zoom sessions where we would talk character or run through a scene. Sometimes we'd tear up and go, yep, that's it, that works.
Oh,
You know,
that's lovely.
I felt
Yeah.
it. And, it may start off with a disagreement on something, but it's just trying to find the kernel of truth that worked for the character that we couldn't see. It was only
Yeah.
when we started running it between us. He's an actor. I've studied acting, so we could play the scene, and then something would happen, or Rosemary would say, "What if you do this?" Yeah, let's talk about it. Yeah, she's right.
Yeah.
It needs this, and that would lead us into something else. So it's a collaboration
Yeah.
to get through that process without egos getting involved, because everything's about the script. Once you get the script right, then it's golden. All you're doing is the mechanics of it after that.
As say a young director that's perhaps starting to get film scripts sort of given to them, and they have, let's just say they're in that same position as you where they really like something, but they do have those changes to make. Sometimes writers can be quite passionate about what they've written and may
Oh
not
yeah.
want to budge. So how would you approach that situation?
Well, we've had that in a couple of situations, but because of my editing background and directing background, the writers tend to acquiesce a little bit. They don't like it, um, and but they can see. And what happens is you're changing their vision of the story.
Yeah.
You're giving it your take on their story. We wrote it. You don't know what it's about. You don't know it as deeply as we do. We know all the backstory. Well, maybe if I knew more of the backstory and it was in the script, I could agree with you. But it wasn't. Or there's logic issues. Have you thought about this? Why does this character do that? Because 10 pages earlier they were doing this. And now it's 2 days later in the story and this has happened. So explain to me how that happened. Ah, okay, I can see what you're saying. You have to be clear as the director as to what is not working for you.
You bring the fresh eyes as well. So
Yeah.
sometimes, I guess I was just mentioning this to Jazz earlier. I've been sort of editing the same movie for months now, and sometimes you get into this like little silo where you sort of like you see nothing wrong with it sometimes, but you need someone's external opinion to give you some creative inspiration.
Oh,
It
absolutely.
sounds like that's what the case is often with writers. I mean, they've been with the script probably for months, if not years.
Yep. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And some of them are they're personal stories, and you come in and say, "Oh, well, let's change that and that." And it's like, but that's my mum you're cutting out. So,
Oh
you
no.
know, um, and you say, well, let's address it. Let's make mum real. What is it about her that you didn't want to say? So you start a talk. You start a dialogue with the writer to find out what their intent was. And I mean, my wife will do it with me. Well, you've written this. I've said X, but now you're telling me about it, and now it makes sense. So put that in the script.
That
Because
makes sense.
it's yeah, and that happens even with editing. I'll finish an edit, and I know every nuance, I know every technical issue with focus or camera movement or running out of shot because we cut too early, or but they don't. So it's like, what do you think? And they go, well, I wouldn't start like that, or it's a bit slow. What do you mean it's a bit slow? I cut tight. Well, I'm bored by this point. Let me go back and look at that. What's making it boring for you? That can be exposition dialogue, something that I learned as a film director on the sort of Bushido film in Thailand. We had a sequence where people said, "Oh, it's a bit boring. We can cut her out with that dialogue." I go, "But that's the important part. That's the best part. Why is it boring for you?" I went back into the film, and there was a line of dialogue spoken by one of the characters earlier on that made that point redundant.
Right, so you didn't
So
need it at all.
I removed the early line.
Right.
So when they get this information, it's all
It's
new,
new. Yeah.
and everyone loves the scene. So, and as an editor, even on the movie Daryl, same thing. Audiences hated the movie the first night. They hated the mother. The next night we screened it for a target audience with a few notes that we changed, some trims at the end of shots. Everyone loved the mother.
Right. That's
Yeah.
amazing. That is just
So,
such a contrast.
and it was like 10 seconds of reaction shots, probably 3 reaction shots I cut short at the end of scenes. And that's all. I didn't change her performance. I didn't change any integral part of her scenes. Just the 3 endings of scenes where she had a doubtful look on her face. I took those 3 moments out, kept the ones that were important, and everyone loved it the next night. And
That's
that's from a
awesome.
ratio of 65 like to 85 like.
Yeah, just by removing like certain aspects and just making
Mm-hmm.
the cuts a little tighter. Well, now that you have sort of all this editing experience and you've been directing for so long, when you get a script on your desk and you read it, do you sort of imagine what it would edit like and what it would screen like before you make that decision of, yes,
To
I
do
want to
it,
make that script?
no, it comes down to story.
Okay.
Does the subject appeal to me? In other words, do I resonate with that
Yeah.
subject? And like the dolphin one, immediately. With the one in Australia that we talked about earlier, resonated totally with me.
What does that mean? So break that down for me, because I
Okay,
think obviously there are writers that listen to this podcast, and I think it's so tough when you have a script you really care about and you're not really getting those feelings, but maybe that could be the perfect thing for someone else. But what does that look like for you? So if it resonates, what does that mean? Does that make you cry? Does it make you
oh,
angry?
I'll go with the dolphin one.
All right, go for it.
Tears 3 times reading it on our first
Wow.
read. So there were triggers that obviously I was affected emotionally for something. And then you try to, you think, oh, well, I'll read it again in a day or so. And tears keep flooding back. And at the same points. And now, this is again part of my education. We gave it to a distributor to look at in terms of possibly getting financed. And he was kind enough to give us script notes. And he said, yeah, of course they're going to cry at that point. Everyone cries at that point. I cried at that point. But that doesn't make a good movie. He said, that crying has to be earned through the movie. I can give you a crying scene here and here and here, and you'll just weep. And it's a 5-minute movie. Or, the movie Up.
Yeah.
First 10 minutes, you're in tears at the end of 10 minutes, and there's no dialogue. So he said, I can give you cryable moments in movies, in scripts, but to cry, you have to you have to earn the audience's tears. So you have to go back into your script and bring me to those tears. You earn it. So you go back into the script, you meet with the writer, say, we need to lose this character because this happens. And if you take that out, we move this in here and we put something at the very beginning of the script, that is going to trigger this, that's going to make this give a certain emotion. And then when this happens, there is no way you can't read it without going full flood. So it's, for writers, they need to be flexible as well, but not, they should defend their work as much as a director or a producer coming in defends why they want to change it. And if you can never agree on it, then it's time to walk away.
Split ways, maybe. Yeah.
I don't resonate with it the way it is, and I'm not going to give you the opportunity to change my work.
It has to be a relationship. There has to be meeting of the minds, because if sometimes, and I've heard horror stories where like you go through, you sort of push through, you get a little bit out of the writer, they don't really budge, and then you end up making, say, a different choice when you're directing it in production, and then you get all hell breaks loose because you haven't followed what the writer's done and whatever. So it really has to be a gentle dance where you don't want to hurt their feelings, but you also want to make the best possible movie you can. And I guess as a director, you probably know this too, but it's either they have the opportunity to get their script made. And I think that's a really big opportunity too.
Oh, absolutely.
Those scripts can go back in the drawer and never see the light of day, but then you've got a potential director that wants to work with you.
Well, there is that give and take. And it's something you also learn when you're crewing. Guys, there's this one movie, I've got 100 DPs I can go to, 100 grips I can go to, 100 special effects people I can go to, editors I can go to, wardrobe people I can go to. I've chosen you. Yes. And getting a film made these days is like a miracle. So, people come on as crew members and they're like, yeah, it was okay, on to the next one. They don't realize the struggle it took the producer, the director, and the writer to actually get the funding to make the movie that they're going to get money for.
Yeah, that's so true.
And they're okay to move on to the next film. You have to keep living with it for another year or so. And
that's right.
So, it's a lot of crew don't understand what it takes to get a project done. As we're complaining about the catering or the craft service. You're lucky you've got a movie to work on.
That's right. The funding is so hard. Especially, you've been in the job long enough to sort of make the comparison, but Do you think it's gotten harder to actually fund films now? And why
Yeah,
do you think so?
um, because more's at stake. Um, the the budgets for movies have gone way up. Gone
Mm.
are the days when you could do um, a 16 millimeter indie, for a few $100 or a few thousand. Um, Now with digital, admittedly, you can get high class results with an iPhone,
Mm.
um, but that doesn't mean everyone's a good filmmaker. So then you get everything coming up on the internet, on YouTube, on Amazon, or TikToks, Instagram, and you just shudder. But it's this proliferation of stuff that just gets out there, and when you're trying to get um, something produced that takes money, they're like, well, they just did that on TikTok. Can't you do it for this? Or,
Yeah.
and then there are the whole AI scenario, or where you duplicate characters to um, fill in crowds, etc. Replication. Um, they cost money. It's like, yeah, we've seen them put big crowds into scenes. And it's like, when you get a script and it's got a crowd of spectators at a sporting event, we'll just throw in crowds. They did it on this, they did it on that.
Mm.
But that costs money. And you can replicate, you can do crowds, but are they any good? It's now going to stand up to a scrutiny on a big screen. And some are good, some are not. The good ones cost money.
I think
So,
there's also the consideration that, like, even though the market's flooded with a bunch of content, that doesn't necessarily mean it competes with the blockbusters and the ones that do have money. And I feel like audiences, they, it's not like they treat indies with more love, I guess, because they've been made on $10 or $1,000, even 100,000, because you get compared to what's on Netflix and
uh-huh.
Stan and all those big streaming companies.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, and obviously to make the ones that go to Netflix and have these amazing, lasting almost like reputations. It's you feel like you just have to have the money for it, but then yeah, you're right. When they bring up sort of, hey, well, there's a guy that made this video on TikTok and got 2 million views.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
We'll give them a movie to direct.
how do you navigate that? That's and especially because a TikTok, they might make that in like a week or two, but a
Yeah,
movie will take a year to
or more.
get or more, and it's just insane. Um,
That's part of the danger. Yeah, it's how to navigate and stand out amongst all the noise and the clutter. And they do. There are certain ones that um, have integrity and quality and storytelling abilities that you see on TikTok or Instagram or uh, YouTube, and you go, "Wow, this person really knows how to direct." And there are studio watchdogs, production watchdogs, looking at this stuff all the time. And suddenly one will become like a phenomenon in Instagram, and they'll go, "Oh, this person would be great to direct this movie." And they've gone from a 10-second TikTok or a 2-minute YouTube video to a 140-minute blockbuster,
yeah,
and it bombs. And it's like, well, he's got a big following. Why did it bomb? It's like the latest Avenger movie with the girls directing and the girls starring. Now, does that mean that it's weak because it's a female-driven movie, or is it people are sick and tired of spandex
yeah,
superheroes?
yeah.
Is it the one that's just happened that's broken the mold, and everyone's going, maybe I'll wait to see what they do next. I'll go, maybe I won't. And these are, 150, 200 million, 300 million
Yeah,
dollar
they're
movies.
huge.
So where does that put the average or even beginning filmmakers? Yes, if you can get your film up onto YouTube, all you have to do is just make sure it's a good story, well told, and it's out there like everybody else. And you pray that someone's going to see it.
Yeah.
Or you manage to get an interview and you can say, oh, check this video out.
Yeah.
So at least you have something.
That's
And
great.
that's the best advice I can give to young filmmakers is you have the tool, whether it's an iPhone or a video camera, a digital camera, to go and shoot something on a weekend.
Yeah.
But, do a 2 or 3 minute short. Look at movies. Look at the way they're shot. Look at the structure. Look at the shooting style. Don't use your friends as actors. Find theater groups that have experienced actors in them that would love to do a film.
Yeah.
Study acting to understand how to direct actors, to get performances. If you have the opportunity, study editing, because you'll learn all your mistakes while you're exercising. Then when you feel like you've got something that's solid, then you can put it up on YouTube and let people come and explore the work and see if it resonates with people.
I love that advice. Adrian, thanks so much. And for our listeners out there, thanks so much for listening to The Creative Constitution.
Thank you, guys.
And we'll catch you in the next one.